Good morning, Christoph.
Good morning, Rodrigo.
Here we are recording a podcast for Bitrefill. My name is Rodrigo. I'm here with my friend and colleague Christoph, and we're going to have a little talk about Ordinals in Bitcoin today. So, Christoph, can you briefly describe your experience and background in the field of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain technology?
Yes, so where should I start? I was always interested in computer stuff, and I'm also always have been interested into economics and into markets and stuff. And I heard about Bitcoin, and like maybe all of us in the beginning, I thought it is a scam. I think the first time I saw it was on a website where you could top up credit cards, and there was a top-up function, and it was called Bitcoin. And I was immediately like, okay, this is some kind of nerd money or some kind of money for people who know more about computers than me. And if I get engaged with that, they will steal my money because they know more about this than me. And then they will find some ways to steal my money. So I was not interested into it. And then I don't know when, but then I saw a video about Bitcoin, and it was like explaining the basic functionality of Bitcoin within 5 minutes. And after I've watched this video, this 5-minute video, I was completely hooked. I was like, when I first heard this blockchain and how this works and how nobody can steal my money because it's a distributed ledger, I was immediately like, okay, this is something revolutionary. This is a brilliant idea. And from that day on, I think there was not a single day that I didn't do anything with Bitcoin. And so I fell into this rabbit hole like anyone does. And and then I got involved into the Bitcoin community. I especially moved to Berlin because I heard that this is the epicenter of Bitcoin community and Bitcoin culture in Germany, especially when it comes to the more technical community. And so, I moved to Berlin, and I went to the meetups in Room 77. And then, I met other builders, and then we organized some events, for example, the Lightning Conference. And then I started to work with Fulmo a lot. And then, then I discovered also Bitrefill, first as a user. And also many other people in the Berlin community are big fans of Bitrefill. And so, I started also to work for Bitrefill. I'm a country manager for the German-speaking countries. And I think that's the short version of how we came to this day.
Let's just say a little shout out to our friend Jeff.
That
we have in common. He's been to El Salvador
exactly.
Several times, and we have lots of contact. We met him both in Miami some weeks ago.
Exactly, yeah.
So a big hug to you, Jeff. So continuing, can you share a recent project or research you were involved in related to Bitcoin?
Yes, for example, I'm involved in the Raspberry Blitz as always. Since the very start of it, I would say. And at the moment, I'm also building apps on Lightning. So I'm really curious about this because when you think about, for example, the internet, it's not like that the internet becomes successful because the TCP/IP protocol, it's the protocol which is the base of the internet. Because this protocol is so successful, it's way more because we have built applications on top of this protocol like Facebook or Google Maps. These are the things that made the internet a real success, or Amazon. And so at the moment, I would try to build as much as possible on top of the Lightning Network, so on top of this protocol, to make them successful, so to bring new users to Bitcoin, because when we have this protocol, we also should use it. And so, for example, I've built a VPN service. It's called LNVPN. It's very basic functionality. It's just a VPN, and you pay it with Lightning because when it comes to privacy, Lightning is perfect. Especially if you pay for something as a user, you have really good privacy. So that's a project where Lightning is a perfect fit. And I'm also building at the moment a lot with Ordinals because I as I said, when I discovered Bitcoin and when I heard about the blockchain, I had this feeling this is a brilliant idea. And I had exactly the same feeling when I discovered the Lightning Network. And now, again, with Ordinals, I have a similar feeling that it's also like, okay, this is a very exciting, very simple and very brilliant idea. And so I also started to build on top of Ordinals. I've built a simple minting service, very basic, where you can pay with Lightning. You can upload a file or a text or whatever, and then you pay with Lightning. And then this ordinal is inscribed on the Bitcoin blockchain. But I think we will talk about this later a little bit more in detail, how this works to inscribe something.
Yeah, when people talk about ordinals and inscriptions and so forth, we get into the territory of NFTs in a way, but not the NFTs that everybody's used to. It's about non-fungible tokens, which means that they're different from each other. And an example I often hear is that for Bitcoin or for Ether or many other cryptocurrencies, there's no difference between one Bitcoin and one Ether. It's like you go to the kindergarten and you pick up a kid, whatever kid. But with the NFTs or non-fungible tokens, then it's you pick up your kid. Do you think this is a good description?
No.
Okay.
No, I to be honest, I don't think, because because every human is also a non-fungible token, because every kid is different. Every kid has a different hair color, every kid has a different eye color, and so I think maybe humans are not such a good example. But what is a good example for non-fungible tokens? I mean, for example, fungible. For example, if you just go to a normal currency, like a dollar. A dollar is always a dollar, so it's perfectly fungible. But when it comes to, for example, I don't know, rare coins or so, they are non-fungible. They are each coin is a little bit different, especially when they are older ones. But maybe it's also not such a good example. But humans, I would say, they are they are non-fungible.
Okay. I will stop doing that comparison, I think, then. So, talking more about ordinals, how would you explain the concept of Bitcoin ordinals to somebody who is completely unfamiliar with it?
Okay. There are two different things, and they are important to keep them separated. There is, on the one thing, ordinals, and on the other side there are so-called inscriptions. But when we talk about ordinals, usually we talk about both things. Ordinals, it's kind of a protocol. It's kind also of a theory, and it tries to track Satoshis on the blockchain. It tries to trace the way of a Satoshi on the blockchain. But of course, this is not possible, because Satoshis, they are fungible. Yeah? There is no difference between, for example, if I would own any Bitcoin, there is no difference between the Satoshis I have and between the Satoshis you have. So how should we trace them? And there is a very simple theory, and this is the ordinal theory, and it's called first in, first out. Maybe people know this concept also from stock trading, for example. And when it comes to pay taxes, when you do first in, first out, then it's like I buy some stocks, for example, and then after 5 years I sell some of these stocks. And I have bought stocks not only at one day. I have let's say I buy the stocks every month for 5 years. So I have bought over 5 years. I have bought stocks all the time. Every month I have bought some stocks. And now it comes to the day that I want to sell some of them. And now I have to calculate my taxes. Yeah. So how much gains did I make? For example, there are different ways now to calculate my gains. For example, I can say, okay, I sell some stock, and to calculate my gains, I select the stocks I have bought in the middle, for example, of this 5 years, or at the beginning, or at the last. So it's difficult how to do this. And so there's, for example, this concept of first in, first out. So the first stocks I sell the gains are calculated accordingly to the stocks I bought first. So it's this kind of scheme. And there's also last in, last out, but for ordinals, it's always first in, first out. So what does it mean? We have Bitcoin transactions, and Bitcoin transactions, they are always made from inputs and outputs. So I put some Satoshis into the transaction, and then we have outputs. This is, for example, if the Bitcoin go to someone else, or if some of the Bitcoin going back to myself because I have some change. And so to trace these Satoshis on the blockchain, we use also here first in, first out. So the first Satoshi of the first input will be the first Satoshi of the first output, and so on. Of course, this is not the same Satoshi, because on the Bitcoin blockchain, it's not that they are that there are satoshis are moving or so, because something like a satoshi also doesn't really exist. It's way more that we just update ledger entries. For example, if we make a transaction, it's not that satoshi is flowing from me to you. It's just that we update our balance. So, for example, my balance is reducing and your balance is increasing. So this is just a theory, and it doesn't affect the fungibility of satoshis, because in the beginning many people were concerned when they heard about ordinals. They are like, oh, this is very dangerous because it's affecting the fungibility of Bitcoin, because it's very important that Bitcoins are always fungible, so that it's not the case that some satoshis are, for example, a little bit more in value than other satoshis. So it's very important always to keep all of the satoshis fungible. So this ordinal theory is just a theory. It's not like that we really affect the fungibility of satoshis. It's just that we had some kind of template, some kind of protocol on top of the Bitcoin blockchain and all its transactions, and we try to trace the satoshis always with this first in, first out. And this is the one thing. This is the ordinals, and this is very important. For example, if we have this kind of NFTs, to track them on the blockchain. And the second thing is inscriptions. And inscriptions are just a way to put data on the blockchain, and this data is not related to any transaction, so it's arbitrary data. To be honest, in my opinion, the first inscription was in the Genesis block by Satoshi himself, yes, because he did this kind of, I would call it an inscription, when he said that the chancellor on the brink of bailout. And in my opinion, this was the first time, or this is for sure, it was the first time that someone put arbitrary data on the blockchain. And this is exactly now what's also happening with inscriptions. But the inventor of this whole ordinal theory, Casey, he's from California, and he found a way to do it very brilliant, and we will talk about why it is brilliant later. In every Bitcoin transaction, or in every Bitcoin block, you have something, this is called the witness data. You have the normal transaction, where all the transactions are in the block, but you have also some block space where the witness data is inside. So for inscriptions, it's not that important to know exactly what the witness data is. It's just a part of the Bitcoin block where you can put data into. And this is normally meant to put the witness data in it, but Casey found a way or he saw the way that you can put any data into this witness data, whatever you want. And the interesting thing is, and this is because I said it's brilliant, when you put data into this witness data, then you have some advantages. For example, the first advantage is every Bitcoin node has something, it's called the UTXO set. The UTXO set is how should I say, it's a list of all the currently existing UTXOs which are spendable. And in every Bitcoin node there is this UTXO set, and it's in the RAM. So it's not on the hard drive, it's in the RAM. So it's in the part of the node which can be accessed very quickly by the CPU, by the processor. And whenever you save data into the witness data, it's not going into this UTXO set. And this is very good because the UTXO set has to be very small so that the nodes can operate very efficient. So this is one advantage. It's not put into the UTXO set. Like, for example, if you look at older methods to put data into the blockchain, like, for example, before Counterparty, for example, or like stamps, this is also something new at the moment. They put the data into the UTXO set, and so the UTXO set becomes bigger and our nodes become slower. So this is very good with inscriptions, that the data is not stored into the UTXO set. There's one advantage. Another advantage is that you get something called like the witness discount. So normally you pay 1 Satoshi for every byte. But if you put data into the witness data, you pay only a quarter of a Satoshi. So the inscriptions are also very cost efficient. And this means also that the transaction fees are not that high as if you would put data, for example, in other parts of the Bitcoin block. And next, and the third advantage is, for example, if you don't like inscriptions, and you don't want to have all these inscriptions on your full node, it's very easy to do this for you, because you can download the blockchain once, and also you verify the witness data once. But after you have downloaded all the transaction data and all the witness data, and you have checked the witness data if it's correct, then you can just remove it. You don't need it anymore. If you have checked this data once, you can remove it, and then you don't have to store all these inscriptions on your node. So yeah, this is why I think it's very very genius and also very simple, and that's also I think why it is so successful, because people understand it very quickly. I mean, also if I have maybe explained it a little bit complicated, go to the internet, do some research, you will understand it very easily. And in my opinion, it's way easier to understand than, for example, something like RGB or also Taproot assets, and that's I think why it's so successful, because new developers, they see it, they do maybe 30 minutes research on it, and then they understand it, and then they can't build on it. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a limit to how much data you can put into the witness?
Yeah, there's a limit. It's 4 megabytes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can put now up to 4 megabytes into the witness data. Yeah.
You know, for some people that sounds like nothing, but for people, you know, like a little order, that's almost a movie.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I saw already people putting really long videos into the witness part. So created really cool videos, and I also saw some people who made really cool games and put it on the blockchain. So, as you said, 4 megabyte for some people sounds nothing, but it's also interesting that people got now very, very creative when it comes to compressed data, yeah, because Bitcoin block space is extremely rare, and at the moment it's really, really expensive to put something into the blockchain. It's not like that the artists just put all their crap. Like some people say, just put crap on the blockchain. No, it's not like that. So you have to really think in advance how to, if you want to put your collection onto the blockchain, you have to really think a lot about it, how to compress it, how to do it, and how to optimize your images. And so, because even if you've done all of that, you will also pay a lot of money at the moment. Yeah, I think like Bitcoin Magazine, they did an inscription, and they paid 1 Bitcoin in fees, for example, for one of them, yeah, for their whole collection of these Bitcoin classic covers or so.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. So we already talked about this a little, about different potential applications that could be built, but could you give more examples that could be built upon this protocol?
Yeah, I mean, there are at the moment. There's one, and of course the biggest use case is NFTs. And to be honest, I never had any attachment to NFTs, and I'm also in the real world, I'm not a collector or so. So I was never really engaging with the NFT stuff and also with the NFT community. But now I did a little bit because of the Ordinals, and I met a lot of creators and also a lot of NFT collectors, and many people are really into that. Yeah, so it's always nice to make a step out of your bubble. I was always in this Lightning and Bitcoin bubble, but of course there's also, I think in size it's also even equally. There are so many people into NFTs, so this is of course a use case for this Ordinals. There are so many people now coming to Bitcoin, also many artists coming to Bitcoin, because they are saying like, finally we can do what we have done the last 2 years on Solana or Ethereum. Now finally we are able to do it in Bitcoin. We wanted always to do it on Bitcoin, but we were not able. So the NFTs, they are of course a big use case, and there is also now this use case of BRC20 tokens. To be honest, I'm also not really sure about if this is such a good idea or not, because the protocol is not that efficient, how it is built and designed. But I also did now a little bit of research into other protocols like RGB or Taproot assets. And then I have to say, it's not that inefficient for me anymore. on the other side, it's also very simple. This is also an advantage of this BRC20 protocol, but also for RGB and also for Taproot, you need also Taproot assets. You also need on-chain transactions. So we have this BRC20 tokens as also a big use case at the moment. But to be honest, a lot of that is based on meme coin and speculations. And yesterday I read something like a BRC30 standard, so that you can do now liquidity mining and staking. So I'm not sure if this will last, because usually this kind of hypey things disappear. But besides of that, what is also really interesting, and I'm also trying to build something on that right now, is that we have now something like a decentralized marketplace built on Bitcoin, because we can exchange these ordinals. And when we talk about ordinals, it's not only NFTs, it can be any kind of document. It can be your last will, if you want to store this on the blockchain, and it's very easily to track it. For example, if you change anything in your last will, you just do it maybe on the same address, or you do a pointer to your old last will. And you can always sign a message with your private key, so that you can guarantee, yes, I have put this last will on the chain. So this is, for me, it will be maybe a use case in the future. And as I said, we can build this completely decentralized marketplaces now with so-called partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So it's also very simple in theory. And it works. For example, you sign a Bitcoin transaction, you want to sell a document, yes, let's say maybe a JPEG or also a PDF document, and then you sign only a few parts of a Bitcoin transactions. And the parts you are signing is, for example, you give your document to someone, you don't specify who, you give it to someone, and you also sign the part of the transaction where you receive, for example, 1 Bitcoin for it. That's it. And then you broadcast this transaction and you put it on a marketplace, for example, and everybody can see it. And maybe there is someone who says, okay, I want to take this offer. So he or she is going to take your partially signed transaction and is signing the rest of it. So, for example, putting their own address into it and also putting the 1 Bitcoin into the transaction, and then they sign the rest of the transaction. And then they broadcast the transaction to the mempool, and then it will get mined. And then, you have made a trade. And you don't need to trust anyone here, because it's completely trustless. And I think this is something where we can build a lot. Also, when it comes, for example, to Nostr, this new decentralized, social media. Yeah, but you can also use it for other stuff. For example, you can also use it like to build some kind of decentralized exchanges. For example, when we do this with these partially signed transactions, we need something where we store, for example, our order book. We don't want to have this on one server. So, for example, we could use the Nostr relays to publish this kind of partially signed transactions, so everybody can see them and can grab or offer and sign it and then transmit it to the blockchain. So I think this is something which will also be useful. And to be honest, I could easily imagine that we will see other use cases also in the future.
Is this close to a smart contract then, would you say?
Yes. I talked, I have been to the BlackFi hackathon in Miami 2 weeks ago, and it was funny because they also had an Ordinals track, and there were some Ethereum developers. And they were like really, really curious about what is happening right now in Bitcoin. And they said, finally, they have a reason to come back, because these developers, for example, they left Bitcoin in 2014, they said, because it got too boring for them, and then they were looking for other projects, and then they did a lot of Ethereum development. They were really experienced when it comes to Solidity, for example. It's the programming language to write smart contracts on Ethereum. And they were like, okay, this partially signed Bitcoin transaction is by far the purest form of a smart contract. That's exactly how a smart contract works. And it's extremely simple, and you can't mess it up. Like they said, okay, when you want to do the same thing, for example, on Ethereum, you have to write many lines of code. And they also, I forgot the exact name, but they showed me also another smart contract, which is very famous because it is very short. It has only 20 lines. And they said this was always a good example that everybody thought that this is a perfect and a very secure smart contract. But they also found 5 or 4 bugs in this 20 lines of code. So they said it's really nice that we have now something like this partially signed Bitcoin transaction as the purest form of a smart contract. And as they said, you can't mess it up. Yeah.
So this is not only attracting users or people that want to, inscript their their images, their text, or anything. It's also attracting back developers, in your opinion.
Definitely. And this is something really, really important, because we need every developer in Bitcoin. It's so important that we have as many developers as possible. And I also want to reach out, if you're a developer and if you want to build something, come to Bitcoin. You're always welcome. And I see at the moment a lot of developers coming, and especially when it comes to the ordinal stuff, they are almost every one of them is from other chains. So sometimes I feel I'm the only one coming from the Bitcoin community, because it doesn't matter to whom I talk, but they are always like, many come from Stacks, for example. They are building a lot, so a lot of these big applications and big marketplaces, they are all coming from Stacks. There are also many coming from the Ethereum side. And a huge majority is also coming from Bitcoin SV. I have realized, maybe because they always wanted to store data on the blockchain, and now they can do it on Bitcoin, so they don't do it on BSV anymore. But it's definitely attracting developers.
Okay.
Definitely.
That's very interesting, because I haven't really read. I've been trying to follow on all the development on a very superficial level, because I'm not a developer. Yet I work in the industry, so you have to know some things. And I was also to Miami, so I was trying to keep track of everything that's going on. But this is very interesting, actually. I was thinking, in the Ethereum blockchain, people usually get the advice that they should learn Solidity, as you mentioned, to learn to program smart contracts and so forth. What are the requirements, or what would you recommend a developer that wants to work with these things in the Bitcoin blockchain to learn?
That's a really good question. For me, it was also completely new, because, as I said, I was always working a lot with Lightning, and I was always like, okay, this on-chain stuff, boring. I don't want to. I never was curious about it, or said, okay, I want to get involved into that more or learn more about it. I was always like, okay, Lightning is already such a huge space. There I have enough. I can learn and can explore. But now I have to catch up on all these things. And I can really recommend, for example, if you want to learn about this stuff, as I said in the beginning, it's so simple. The Ordinals 3, this protocol is so simple. So it's enough if you just, for example, read from Andreas Antonopoulos, Mastering Bitcoin. This book is now on my desk constantly, because I had to look up a lot of things. And it's just how Bitcoin transactions work. That's the most important thing, that you just know, okay, there are some things like inputs, and then there are some things like outputs. And you can sign them in different ways, and you can build all kind of fancy stuff. Maybe you should also learn a little bit about taproots and what you can do with that. But it's basically just learn how Bitcoin transaction works, how a Bitcoin transaction works, and maybe also have a look into ordinal theory. Maybe there's a extremely good site. It's called ordinals.com. Very simple, by Casey, the inventor of the Ordinals protocol. And on this site you find a lot of resources if you want to get into it a little bit more. Yeah.
So Mastering Bitcoin, that once upon a time was like the intro to Bitcoin, now it has become, again,
exactly
the main encyclopedia. Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I remember it. I don't know when I read it first time, but it was very mind-blowing in the first time I read it. But now I have to study it again.
And what would you say are the requisites to understand that book, programming-wise? Is it JavaScript? Is it Python? What would you recommend?
I think there is a lot of Python in it. Yeah, it's definitely Python. But also, if you are not a developer, you should also be able to understand most of it, I would say. When I read it the first time, I was also not that deep into Python or something like this, and it was easily to understand. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. So now, on the other side, do you see any drawbacks or security concerns or scalability concerns related to Bitcoin Ordinals?
Yeah, I mean, scalability is now a big topic again. Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy about this, because if Bitcoin would always stay at 1 Satoshi per VByte to get into the next block, it will die one day, because we need transaction fees, we need usage on the blockchain. And the problem with Bitcoin is, the Lightning people, they don't create any transaction fees because they have Lightning, and Bitcoin hodlers and the hodl gang, they are also not creating any transaction fees because they make one transaction in their lifetime, and then when they inherited their Bitcoin to their offspring, that's it. So we need someone who is creating transactions. So I'm happy that now the Ordinals people create some fees. That's really nice. And of course, we have now some scalability issues. I mean, some people were complaining that now these JPEG editions are spamming the blockchain, and that people in the global south can't transact anymore. But I mean, for exactly this, we created Lightning. And if we would have transaction fees low like we had them over the last 8 months or so before Ordinals, Lightning would also gonna die, because it was always cheaper to send, for example, $100 on-chain than on the Lightning network. When you do it with 1 Satoshi per VByte, it's definitely cheaper to do it on-chain than with Lightning. So, yeah, when it comes to security, I don't know if there are any concerns. Maybe there are some concerns, and maybe I don't have them in mind now. But as you don't have to change anything on the base protocol, like you don't have to do any updates or whatever, or any soft forks. So at the moment, I don't see any security issues. Maybe I'm not aware of them right now, but I don't see any security issues right now.
Yeah, because in the past, I think that discussion, I guess the idea was that the miners were going to get, the input they had to do was to mine, and then they will get the Satoshis or the Bitcoins, for every block that was mined. But now this brings us like 120 years into the future, when they can actually maybe live on the transaction fees, which is amazing too, because it motivates them even more to be a part, to become a node.
Yeah, I mean the miners are totally on the Ordinal side. Yeah, I just want to make it clear they are totally into Ordinals.
Yes, we talked about this, about the transaction fees and block size, and we also talked about how the Bitcoin Ordinals actually are widening the accessibility of Bitcoin to a broader range of users, but not only users, we have realized, but also developers, and it's also being embraced by miners as well, of course. I had the opportunity to go to the launch party of the Taproot Wizards in New York during the NFT week there, and it was when you see it, you just start laughing, because the wizards, they're so ugly, and they had all the I don't know how many wizards they have, but they have them over the walls, etc. etc. So it's it has been, many people see this as a direct attack on Bitcoin. This is the ongoing conversation. So I guess, can you explain a little why people find this controversial?
Yeah, that's definitely a very controversial topic. I mean, why people think it's so controversial? I mean, I think it always depends why you are into Bitcoin. If you are into Bitcoin because you want to build stuff, you want to build funny stuff, but you also want to have something like a censorship-resistant distributed ledger, and then I think you are not really seeing a big problem into the Taproot Wizards, because nerds and maybe also cypherpunks, we like to build such funny stuff and do things different and explore new ways and new technologies, and that's definitely a new technology. And I think when you approach it from that way, maybe you are fine or neutral with it. But on the other side, if you come from the side like you hate the Fed and I don't know, you want to end the state, and you think Bitcoin is the ultimate tool for that, and to liberate everyone and to have this global payment system where we get completely independent from the state and whatever. And if you are very serious about that, then I can imagine that you don't like when someone is playing around with it. But I also have to mention that if it's possible to attack Bitcoin with wizard heads and JPEGs, then you should also think about that maybe a state can easily attack Bitcoin. So yeah, if these two guys like Eric and Udi are attacking Bitcoin successfully, then Bitcoin hasn't deserved to survive, because Bitcoin is way stronger. I mean, Bitcoin has outlived several attacks, and this is also happening here right now. Yeah.
Yeah, we already talked about, the difference between ordinals, inscriptions, and everything, and how that is what has made the inscriptions of these JPEGs, the Taproot wizards specifically, possible into the blockchain. So I get why is it? Do you know why they're called Taproot wizards?
I think it's because there was always a controversial about the Taproot update, as far as I know, and I think Udi always made jokes, because there were some people in the Bitcoin community who were like, yeah, Taproot is bringing smart contracts to Bitcoin, and we will build the next Uniswap on Bitcoin. And of course this is not true, and I think he made always fun of it, and he's also some kind of contrarian sometimes, and when Taproot was very famous, then he was like, no, this is absolutely a nothing burger, and you will see that this has no effect on Bitcoin. And he was of course also right in the beginning, but yeah, now with the Ordinals, Taproot become really useful, because you have to do Taproot transactions to create inscription. And so I think that's why he just wanted to troll all the Bitcoin maxis who were like, yeah, Taproot is a really big thing. And so he created these Taproot wizards to troll them a little bit and to upset them. And he's very good in that.
He's very good at that.
Yeah, yes. Definitely.
He's very good at it. Okay. Thank you, Christoph.
Thank you. Nice for having me.